Welcome back. You're still watching NTV Weekend Edition. Let us dive into getting the facts. We know that on Thursday this week, schools reopened for candidate classes 7 months after the government closed them in a bid to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, the move followed government's decision to issue some guidelines for the reopening of schools. The moves include a requirement to have temperature guns, sanitizers, and the maintenance of social distance. Some sections of the public, though, remain skeptical about the decision to reopen schools for candidate classes. So tonight we do get a teacher's perspective, and specifically we speak to the Mr. Philbert Baguma, who is the General Secretary of UNATU. We've had you a couple of times in our studios that I do not want to say welcome to our studios tonight. I just want to say welcome home.
Yes, thank you.
Well, from our last interaction, you know, the last time we had this same discussion, you said you are not happy or you are not content with the way the whole reopening of schools was handled. Has that opinion changed?
Obviously, it hasn't changed, only that it has come to reality. Because the preparedness was rushed. And earlier on, we had talked about the capitation grants which were sent to schools for second term. The cows were told to demand this money from head teachers. Some cows acted unhumanly, I may say, and blocked even the school accounts, and the head teachers were left stranded. Some, actually, majority of the cows and town clerks as accounting officers acted in an administrative way, and they looked at the realities on the ground and said, okay, you can use up to 45% in primary and maybe 60% in secondary, and business went on. In those schools, we don't have issues. But there are those who said money should be returned intact. Now, even if you sent me money today on my account, the moment it lands there, it is no longer intact because there are bank charges, there are URA taxes. So this caused a lot of unrest. And when it was time to reopen, the government had not sent money for implementation of standard operating procedures. And as a result, the head teachers were hands tied, and they remained waiting for the money. Even up to now, there are some local governments which have not released the money. Others were releasing the money yesterday, and therefore some schools have not reopened, and which is unfortunate. 7 months down the road, you find the schools are not prepared to reopen for one class, the candidate class or 2 classes. It is unfortunate. However, a good number of institutions and schools have opened, and they are trying to cope with the situation.
All right, so if we can put it boldly that your opinion has still not changed, you would have loved for the whole reopening of schools not to be done.
That was not the idea. The idea was how prepared we were at that time. Even now, the teachers have not been trained. I mean, yes, they are listening to radios, they are watching televisions, but they need the training on how to handle COVID scenarios. Because today, if there is a COVID case in a school setup, the medical personnel are not anywhere near the schools, and therefore, what is going to happen? So there is a lot that needs to be done. But as we move on, then the responsible centers should play their roles to make sure that there is preparedness to a certain level. It may not be 100%, but at least 90% preparedness. Yes.
Well, you've pointed out some of the issues that we wanted you to point out tonight. But
Yes.
from your own perspective as a teacher, the schools have reopened. Paint for us a picture of how it looks now with the candidates back to school.
Right now, you may not tell the exact picture because some parents have not sent their children. There are some schools where up to yesterday, they had less than 10 candidates. And therefore, the situation is not yet to the level how we can gauge. There is, the teachers have reported, the learners are still reporting, and I think not more than 70% of the schools have received 100% of their learners. Of course, there are those who are still gauging. Are we safe in schools? Should I go back to where I were, or I should change the school? So possibly by the end of next week, we should be in a position to tell exactly the picture that is on the ground. But right now, as I tell you, there are some learners who were waiting for face masks. They were not there. They went to school. The school administration said, no, you have to come with a face mask. Now, there are others who have not had the certificates for reopening. They have not opened. There are schools which have not been inspected up to today. They are waiting for the inspectors. So the whole situation is not yet to the level where we can say, yes, this is now the picture on the ground.
All right. Well,
Yes.
also, if you're a parent and maybe you took your child back to school this week, please do share with us your comments, your experience of how it went, how it felt like actually taking your children back to school on our social media platforms, on Facebook or even on Twitter. Well, as we come to the end of this interaction, what are
Yes.
some of the recommendations that you have for the smooth running of the education system as it is now?
First of all, we need to realize that the running of education institutions is quite different from how we run other institutions, because we deal with human beings. The products of our education system are the learners. Therefore, for example, in the 7 months when the schools were closed, you cannot assume that since the schools are closed, they should not release any money to the schools. Some classrooms had anthills coming up. Other schools were in the bushes, and some head teachers were using fire to burn the grass because they had no option. There are schools which have teachers on a private basis. They have to be paid because they were being paid by the parents. Now the parents were not paying, and therefore they needed money. The night watchmen, you cannot say the school is closed, the night watchman should go away. No, you are putting the property at risk. So the head teachers need to be supported to continuously do their work. Now that we have reopened the schools, there is a need for close monitoring, because we have also heard that some private schools are inviting senior 3 and senior 5 to beef up the numbers, and P6, which is very dangerous, because the purpose for which the schools were reopened is going to be defeated, and we may have challenges of schools being closed. 2, those schools which have failed to meet the 60% target of standard operating procedures, there should be a way. How do we help them? Because you might find it is the only school within a sub-county. So how do we help the parents? Because the parents may not have now the capacity to take their learners outside the sub-county. So there is a need for close monitoring and inspection, giving support where it is needed, so that the reopening does not only cater for a few and leave others behind. But also, we need to make sure that if possible, government should come in and look into the idea of registration fees, examination registration fees, because some parents are really at home. They have lost jobs. Some parents are on half pay. Others, the businesses are not doing well. And therefore, if we want these learners to transit from where they are to the next level, then the issue of examination fees should be looked into, so that we are sure every learner is going to do exams, because even if you don't pay school fees, But you have paid examination fees, you are allowed to do exams, and then you can pay later.
All right, well, thank you so much. But also briefly tell us, we know that there are also those that are not in candidate classes that still do not know how the future looks like. How should these be dealt with in the
This
meantime?
should be the beginning of the discussion, because once we have opened for candidate classes, we are monitoring to see how the situation is going to look like. But there should be a roadmap, so that even when they are at home, they know that possibly in January we shall go back to school. If things don't work out in January, reasons can be given for the extension, but that creates hope, that opens up the discussion, and they begin to prepare their way to go back to schools.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Philbert Bagoma, for joining us and, of course, giving us a teacher's perspective on the recent reopening of schools. You too, at home, if you took your children back to school this week, please do send us your thoughts. How was the experience on our social media platforms, that is NTV Uganda on Facebook and NTV Uganda on Twitter? NTV Weekend Edition will continue shortly.